Over the past 16 years of writing musical theater, I've learned an incredible amount of lessons and information through all of my experiences. There have been triumphs and joyous moments of beautiful creativity, and there have also been plenty of times filled with failure, loss of resolve, and questioning on whether or not I want to keep doing this. Sondheim really said it all with the lyric, "Good times and bum times, I've seen 'em all in my dear. I'm still here." As we celebrate my 100th regular video on this channel, join me as I take you through the highlights and the lowlights and everything I learned along the way across the past 15 years plus of writing musical theater. Act 1, excited and scared. Y'all, when I started writing musical theater, I was so excited to dive into this art form. I've loved musicals since I was a kid, and I've been performing in them as well. I had been in college for a few years at this point, and I had learned different facets of the craft, things like musical direction, and I worked as a stagehand in several capacities, in addition to being challenged to play and sing roles that either weren't a fit for me as I thought of myself, or were giving me an opportunity to try something new that I wouldn't likely get a chance to try in the quote-unquote real world. When I discovered that, well, people write the musicals, therefore you could be one of those people to write the musicals. Like, when I had that idea come to mind for the first time, my mind was blown, and I was just suddenly so excited. I was like, wait, I can be like my idols? I can do this thing? Now, I will say, foolishly, I kind of just dove in head first without even learning too much. I talk a lot about how early on there was not a lot of information and I was looking for it, and that's true. What I often leave out of this story though is I tried to write some stuff initially, not even attached to a big story or a big project, just to try my hand at writing musical theater without any info. I hadn't even looked for the info yet. I just went for it. It didn't go well. I wasn't even able to finish a song early on. It was just utterly arresting. But I was so excited, I had to continue. What I think really did it for me when I was like, hey, I can analyze this stuff. I can figure out what happened. I asked one of my professors, I was like, I know that this is not the point of this class, but can I take a Sondheim song and analyze it as a way to figure out how musical theater writing works? She was like, okay, very grateful for that moment of okay. Very, very grateful. And here I was thinking, you know what? I'm gonna analyze the opening of Sweeney Todd. Well, it turns out that really what I analyzed was approximately 30-ish measures. Not a 32 bar, that's not what it was, but I hit the limit of pages for the paper, and I was not even into a lot of the sung material. It really was like 30 bars of music, and it was just a deep dive analysis. But that paper, in addition to the fact that I was taking a playwriting class at the time, teaching me a whole bunch about writing for theater and structure, and I was terrible at playwriting, this combo platter right here made me go, oh, I gotta learn how to actually do this now. Let's go find the things. Where are the books? Where's the info? Where's the resource? Now I do also want to throw into this mix here, because we all know that I couldn't find the resources. I say it all the time. But at this point, I had also been writing music since I was a kid. I actually wrote my first song for piano when I was in 4th grade on a lunch break in the music room, my chorus teacher's room. Yes, I was having lunch in the chorus teacher's room that early in my career. I'm sure you can relate. Now, in terms of pure composition work, without sung material, without words, that's most of what I thought I had the skills for as a kid. When I was in late elementary school, middle school, high school. And so my composition work only went okay. There were glimpses of gold along the way. There were a couple of pieces I still look back on very, very fondly, including that first piano piece that I wrote. It was quite profound for a 4th grader. I'm proud of little Michael. All that to say that I had a background in writing music to a certain extent. So when it came into the deep dive to learn how to write musical theater, I wasn't picking up that skill entirely from the beginning. It was really more of the word skill and the storytelling through music skills that I was looking to tackle. So that's a large part of why I chose to follow Hammerstein's advice to Sondheim in terms of taking a play that I loved, that I I admire and turning it into a musical as an exercise. So I chose one of my favorite plays, A Streetcar Named Desire, which is, of course, very theatrical, very heightened to begin with. And I said, okay, this seems to be the kind of thing where if I just give myself some time, some space, some energy, figure out a way across this summer that I have to sprinkle in writing and adaptation, then I can just zhuzh the actual dialogue. We'll keep most of the dialogue as it is, but we'll find the moments that are going to get eaten up into song. And I'm going to write a musical and do it based on the small bits of info I found so far. And I did across 4 weeks while I was rehearsing and performing West Side Story, and my parents were largely out of town due to a whole bunch of things they were doing that summer. Pretty much had time to myself between work and rehearsal or performance, and I was playing around with this. Sitting down, creating a musical world, and trying to infuse storytelling with music. Now, I didn't know much about structure, so actually, I didn't know anything about structure, let's be real. So I was kind of making up my own structures along the way. And a lot of it turned into more of sung dialogue, but that was okay because this was a huge win for me. I created over 20 songs in 4 weeks that all had their own flavor, did a slightly different thing, told the story, were well integrated into the play. That was huge. And for anyone who knows me, you know I can sometimes get a little overexcited and a little overzealous. So what did I do? I decided, hey, let's do a reading of this. And we'll use one of the student programs at school, and we're gonna do a reading right away in the fall. And so we did. I think it was October 8th of that fall. So I had 6 weeks to grab people, teach them the material, and just kind of do a concert reading of this brand new thing that had no real craft behind it. Oh, it went okay. It went all right for what it was, but boy, that was a move. That was a move for younger Michael. It was a choice. What I will say is I walked away from that with people understanding that I can tell story, and I can write music, and I can put things on voices in a way that seemed to say to people, hey, you've got talent, keep going. And that was the big takeaway from that ultimate failure that was that reading. So since I love challenging myself, and I'm an overachiever, always have been, I decided that for my honors project for my senior year, what I wanted to do was write an original musical. So this is what I proposed to the faculty. They came back and said, well, that's not good enough. If you want your honors, you need to write it in one semester and actually put it up in your second semester. I think they were trying to get me to say no. I had a set of faculty there who were very anti-student for whatever reason. They didn't want us to do things. But I said, okay, challenge accepted. And here I was thinking that this was going to be a step forward. I've already done the one exercise. I skipped the other 3 because apparently I thought I was better than Sondheim. Went straight to the idea of let's write an original musical that is good enough to be produced here at school. And that turned into both here at school and also in a neighboring town at an art gallery as well. So it was going to have multiple performances. And I said, all right, let's do it. This is gonna be great. Turned out it wasn't so great. I hadn't learned anything yet. Even across the rest of my junior year, as I tried to gain more information about musical theater writing, again, there just wasn't a lot to gather. And I tried experimenting a little bit with what I did with Streetcar. I tried my hand more at the playwriting side of things, and nothing was really flowing, nothing was really working. But I was excited to tackle the next project, really excited. So, going into my senior year, I came up with a story that I was gonna write. It was going to be pseudo-company-esque. It was gonna fall more in that realm of a concept musical. And I really thought I was gonna be able to hone my craft. I wrote some material that's okay. That's about all I can say for it. Writing an original show is tough, and I really didn't have anyone to guide me along the way. So ultimately, this whole thing was more of a lateral move, but what I will say as a takeaway was I got the opportunity to write an original for the first time and feel how that's different from an adaptation. It's very different, very, very different. I also learned that structure is probably the most important thing to a planning process. I wish I had structured things better. Even in rewriting that show multiple times after college, I never really found the structure that worked, but this was a huge lesson for me. Really, really big. I was going to focus on structure from then on. But then in addition to that, I learned how to put up something that you've written. That is not an experience a lot of people get. So even though that faculty was trying to get me to say no to this project, I'm actually really grateful that they forced me to go through that process, because I got to direct something I wrote. Musical direct something I wrote, play in the pit for it, and then get it produced with a lot of things that were being provided to me by the college, but I had to get a whole bunch of the other materials and design aspects together. I didn't know what I was doing, so I kind of had to create a team around me and rely on other people. This was a huge lesson to learn. I'm so thankful that I got the opportunity to learn it. Now here's a period of time that I will consider a dark period in my early musical theater writing career. After that show, I went off to do my first professional acting gig down in Texas, in Granbury, and during that period of time I was revising the show, trying to make it better, trying to figure out what worked and what didn't. Most of it didn't, and I didn't know why. So I wrote some new material, I judged some things, and I thought, well, maybe they'll let me do a reading here, see if it's any better. It wasn't. Boy, it wasn't. And people were very kind to me. Everyone always telling me how much potential I had. And I'm glad they did, so I kept going. But yikes, y'all. It wasn't good. I then spent an entire year trying to work at home and save up money to move to New York City. Yeah, it didn't work out too well. The recession really hit hard. But during that period of time, I learned more about orchestration, so I could orchestrate what I did have of this show. And was that useful work? Yeah, I'm glad I know how to orchestrate now. Absolutely. But was I really taking forward steps? No, I wasn't. Wasn't writing anything new, wasn't trying anything new, wasn't really even revising this piece. I moved to New York City, and here I was telling people that I write musical theater, and yet feeling like such an imposter, not knowing anything about it, really. People would call me out on it too and be like, well, what have you written? And then with my hesitancy, be like, well, okay, so you haven't really written yet. And there was a lot of judgment that came along with that, which wasn't exactly cute, but also there's a lot of self-judgment on my side of things as well. Then we get to the following year, and I've got these properties, and I've been sitting on them, and my lovely supportive parents are poking me about it, saying, hey, but that thing you did, it's good and can be better, and we should do it again, and we should do it in a bigger way. And then when the opportunity came for that, in their hometown, my hometown of Rochester, New York, they were doing a first ever Rochester Fringe Festival. They were looking for things to go in it, to team up with the spaces, to figure this out for the first time. My parents were very excited for me to hop on board with this. And I was very, very hesitant. The show wasn't working, it needed a lot of work, I was gonna need help, I didn't know what I was doing, and I felt, again, like such an imposter. This show, in my mind, was terrible. What was I gonna do? How was I gonna put it on stage in front of people? I don't know if any of you can relate to that feeling, but when you feel as though the work you've created, spend so much time with, isn't anywhere close to your taste level, it can be kind of debilitating in a way. But for whatever reason, I said, okay, let's do it. Luckily, I'd met some people through auditioning who I was able to reach out to and be like, hey, do you know anyone who could help me in this regard? Maybe direct it, help me with the script rewrites. And this is when Karen Bowersock of Bristol Valley Theater, which became my artistic home for a decade, said, hey, I do know of someone. Here's his name. You should meet up. I was like, great, okay, lovely, wonderful. And that's when I met with the director, David Shane, here in Midtown. We actually sat outside at Blockheads, for all of you who remember Blockheads in Midtown. And we talked about the show. He had read it. He was excited by new musical theater, excited by a new artistic friend, excited about putting up a show in a new festival and being a part of this creation process, having his performer friends come in and do a new show. There was so much excitement, and that relit me back up. But we had to cut it down to 90 minutes. It was a 2-act, it was like 2 hours, 10 minutes, 2 hours, 15, and it had to become 90. we had our work cut out for us. And I still didn't feel good about what was there. So to be just cutting away felt like, this isn't really solving the problem. And I was still bummed, but I did it. I dove in and I did my best. And we did that festival. And people really liked the show. And I hated it. I just completely, honestly, I hated what we put up there. It was so cringe, y'all. It was so cringe. You can feel I'm getting flushed, right? You can see that. The embarrassment's creeping back up through my body. It's good to talk about this stuff. Ultimately, it went okay. In terms of the festival, we made enough money I could pay everyone, and that was good. And I walked away from an experience that was pretty singular. I had done another production of that show, and in a different way, a different format, partially remote, being here in New York, but also having to perform in Rochester, using resources and connections. My family was so helpful in that regard. We housed people, the actors, with families we knew. We were really scrappy, and it was wonderful in those regards. I learned so much. But I wasn't sure I could continue with musical theater writing. I wanted to pause. Part of me actually really wanted to give up. I almost did. I almost gave up. It was later that late summer, I guess at that point we could consider it, when my girlfriend at the time, I was at her house and we were sitting in our, I guess, early fall, late summer last heat wave. Next to her pool, and I was reading through The Other Boleyn Girl, which she loved, and I loved Anne Boleyn. I loved her story. I had for years already, and I was near the end of the book, and I was so frustrated. I was like, this book is not doing justice to her story, and her story is so good. Why isn't there already a musical of this? And in kind of a snotty manner, she turned to me and she said, well, why don't you write it? I was like, well, maybe I will. And so later that fall, when things were a bit dark for a whole bunch of reasons in life, I decided, you know what? Let's do it. Let's try to write a musical again. This time we have a story. It's a story we already know well. We just have to figure out the version of that story that we want to tell. And let's dive in. I'm saying it like it was multiple people. It was just me. I was going to do book, music, and lyrics, but it was going to be the story of Anne Boleyn, focusing on her and all the things that she accomplished. And I wanted to make her what a lot of these versions of her story don't make her, which was a three-dimensional, real human being. So here we go. By the way, y'all, going into writing something due to heartbreak is probably not the most fueling thing in the world. So I'm not sure I suggest that to people, but I'm glad that the breakup did indeed force me to jump into the process, because once I was in it, it actually became part of my healing journey across like the next 5-6 months, which was great. But I find a lot more energy and life behind choosing to write something because of a positive reason rather than a negative one. I'll just throw that out there for y'all. Take it, leave it, throw it out the window. So here I was motivated, I was diving into this new project. I was excited because I know this person, or at least the idea I had in mind of this person. I was reading more stories about her family, about her life. I was consuming as much as I could and getting really excited about it. I was creating storyboards and I was writing a first draft pass, trying to figure out structure, trying to keep it in mind, failing miserably for years on that front, and creating something that kind of had a score to it. Again, lack of structure here. This was the big thing that I was missing, was about the songwriting piece. I didn't have the education that I wanted, and I was writing really fast. It was so fast, this process. And I was talking about it at work, and then one of the people at work said, hey, we have a small theater company, and we do readings in the summer. Would you like to do a reading of your new show in July? I was like, yeah, I'm naive. I'll say yes to this. It wasn't completed yet. This was like 3.5 months away. I was like, oh boy, what did I get myself into? It didn't really feel as big of a deal as something like what I did at school or that festival. So I was like, No, it's okay. It's fine. Let's do it. And then I invited a whole bunch of people to come see it, like friends, colleagues, and also some of the families of students I was teaching at the time out on Long Island. I was so embarrassed when the day came for that reading. People came down to see me, came over to see me. People traveled for this. And it was technically my third musical. But it was not good. It's not that there weren't things about it that were good, and I had great performers, but it was... mediocre, maybe giving it a little too much credit. I needed help. Act 2. You've got to be carefully taught. Finally, someone said to me, hey, have you checked out the BMI musical theater writing program? I was like, what? What is this? Hold on, say more? Like, why has no one in the past several years brought this up to me? And so I got an opportunity finally to look at the program and apply, and I am so grateful that I not only got an audition, but I got in as an auditor for my first year. So this was 2013. Now, for those of you who don't know, the BMI program is like the program, the musical theater writing program that was first created by Lehman Engel. It is very famous. A lot of very famous writers have gone through it and learned the craft through this program. It's housed within Broadcast Music Incorporated, BMI, and so it's subsidized. It's free. And for 2 years, you go downtown to the World Trade Center for 2 hours each week, and you learn how to write musical theater, and you do it practically. And I was so excited by the idea of this program, to finally learn all the stuff I wanted to learn. And then I got in as an auditor. And again, I was like, oh, wow, it's the world telling me I'm inferior in this regard. I can't really write musical theater. But you know what? I guess I'll stick with it, and I'll audit this year, learn what I can, re-audition. But my plan was to go into this not telling anyone that I'd gotten in as an auditor, because that was shame, that was embarrassment. Little did I know how many hundreds of people apply to this thing every year. I had no idea how lucky I was. None. I learned how lucky. But that boost of confidence for like, we see your potential didn't come till later. I'm so grateful that I did the auditing year. I learned so much very quickly. Very, very quickly. There are a few lecture days that just taught me all the things that filled in all the gaps. I was like, why isn't this in a book somewhere? Where is it? Where are people teaching this? The answer was right here in BMI. So I'm forever thankful that I got into that program as an auditor. And I spent that year not only learning, but also, since we weren't allowed as auditors to be paired up with people and present work in class, I was working with a couple of the other auditors on the side, but I was mostly working on revising The King's Legacy. Oh yeah, that's the Anne Boleyn show. If I didn't mention the title before, that's the show. Yes, I started it in 2012 and it is 2024. I hear you. And at the same time, I had also begun to be a personal assistant, kind of on a light scale, but still a personal assistant to Ben Pasek and Justin Paul. And those are names that are probably very familiar to all of you. And hey, boys, congrats on your EGOT. That's brand new as of this recording. Like, literally 2 days ago. Honestly, I was hoping by working with them that'd be some sort of leg up in the industry, and it wasn't really. I learned some cool things from them, got to do some really cool experiences, met a couple of cool people, and this lasted for a little less than a year that I was with them, and I'm very grateful that they took me on. And I was doing this with them, I was doing BMI over here, and feeling like, well, how do I move forward? What do I do? So I decided I'm gonna do a festival. And I did the Emerging Artists Theater Festival in 2014. I was a late application. I was like, they're not going to take my application for the spring. This will be for the fall. And they said, hey, we have a slot in 6 weeks. Want to do it? And I was like, what? Yeah, okay. Here we go. So I did. And rewrote a lot of things really, really quickly, including mostly half the score. Using what I was learning in BMI, I just sat down and was like, ooh, all right, all these things that aren't really songs, let's see how many of them I can get rid of and I'll rewrite. And I need to make it so Anne Boleyn feels more like a protagonist and that she doesn't feel so two-dimensional. And also we need to bring more of a focus to Elizabeth because she's the whole point, right? She is the legacy of Henry and Anne. That's the irony, is that it's a woman, it's Elizabeth, not the son he was after. And I was like, okay, I can do this, I can dive in, I can make it happen in 3 weeks. So then I can spend 3 weeks finding people and rehearsing. That was perhaps a little bit ambitious. It went okay. The festival actually went fine, and I'm glad that I did it for a lot of reasons. The show was taking steps forward. I got some good feedback, and I learned, okay, here's what all that information from BMI will really do for you. And that was kind of eye-opening to me of, hey, the foundations are the foundations for a reason. The structures work, the songwriting structures work, the storytelling that they teach you, it works. Don't abandon it. Don't feel like you have more knowledge or you're too cool for school or anything like that I had previously been thinking. I was like, okay, let's use those tools. Let's figure this out. And then I dove into a period of time where I figured it out. I came to the realization that I never really gave myself time and space to figure out for certain what this show needed, let alone how to apply all the things I was learning in BMI. And so over the next several years, a lot of it was giving myself time and space, and specifically trying to figure out the structure of the King's Legacy along the way. During this period of time, I also found out that I'm a good songwriter. Hey, once you know how to do it, it's like, oh, this is how all of my talents apply. Got it. Someone should have told me that. But I did get the opportunity to write a whole bunch of songs. I reapplied for BMI. I got in the second time as a lyricist. It was great. Between the 2 years, I met some of my best friends in the entire world. A beautiful, wonderful experience. People are the answer to everything. Connections is the answer. But I was so excited to have this space during this period of time. I was going to keep my songwriting focused inside class. I was going to work. And I was going to rewrite the King's Legacy to figure out the structure. I knew that was going to be the most important thing. BMI kind of hammered that in. It's like, this is important. And it's not just us telling you that. Here are all the reasons it's important. And I got to experience why it's important. So I gave myself time. I gave myself space. I wrote 3 different versions of that show. And 2 of them I threw away immediately. It was only this last one that I looked at and said, okay, this deserves a score. Let's write a score. And so I did. I finally got the time and the space and the energy to write a score. And it was during this period of time, actually, that just before I started diving into that score, I had hit my head and I had given myself a serious concussion. And I could not fathom stopping writing. Was it the best choice to be consistently looking at a computer screen all the time? It wasn't. But what it did for me was it gave me constraints. There was a certain amount of time that I could look at a computer screen before things would get too tough and I'd have to walk away. So I learned how to write songs, how to craft a good score for a musical by being in front of a computer, by being away from a computer, thinking, letting things percolate, resting, sitting in front of a piano, all the different ways a song can possibly be written. I was forced to figure them out, and I'm glad that I was. Not for the reason, but those skills still help me today. And I've gained more since then. But I was able to, with a decent amount of rest along the way, create a great score that became the 2016 version of that show, which was presented in my first industry reading in the fall of 2016. Far too early for an industry read. Little Michael, what were you doing? What were you doing, boo-boo? Wrong choice! Wrong choice! And really, no industry showed up anyway. I made a lot of wrong decisions there. But the show worked. I was so excited. This version of the show was the right structure. Finally, 4 years later, I found the right structure. And so much of the music was good, really good. And I didn't end up throwing away too much of it. It was more of figuring out the nuances of the stories, making sure that Anne still felt centered. She didn't in that version. Henry is this overlooming shadow, kept casting it over. But I learned so much, so much. But it's because I gave myself time and space and rest. It's also during this time, not for nothing, that my second year collaborator and I, Sean Havrilla, wrote an adaptation of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which is a story I've always loved, and we're both nerds for weird dark stuff, and we had to dumb it down a little bit based on our original concept because BMI kind of asked us to stay closer to the original storyline. We are headed back in our weird direction, don't you worry. But during that time of the second year of BMI, while I was working King's Legacy, now that I had a better structure, I was also writing that show. I was asked to participate in a cabaret called Contemporary Christmas, where modern musical theater writers, we were writing songs for the holiday season. And Sean and I wrote a song that became an instant classic. It's a beautiful piece. It's called This Day Each Year. It's on my website. I think it's on YouTube on my Michael Ratty channel, which has almost nothing on it. But it is a beautiful piece. And I was just having so much fun living in this area where I could take my skills and put them to use and just create gorgeous things. Did I have big goals? Yeah, of course I did. But being able to sit down with people and create stuff, that was the joy. When I figured that out, I think the world changed for me. That it's not about doing it alone. It's about doing it with other people. Always with other people. Even if you're writing book music and lyrics, it's about the other people. I couldn't do any of what I did if it wasn't for these classes, for my networks, for my friends, for my peers, for the performers, for directors and musical directors, for my writing collaborators on other projects. All of that. It taught me so much, and it led to the next stage of my writing career. I was finally seen by other people as a writer, but more importantly than any of that, with all of this stuff, with all these other people, I finally saw myself as a writer. Act 3, What I Did for Love. All right, I was working fast and furious, friends. I had to write a new version of King's Legacy. We were working on rewrites for Sleepy Hollow, and I decided, you know what, it's time. I have enough music between all of my projects where I want to do a concert of my material, and I want to do it at 54 Below. Always ambitious, Michael, always ambitious. But we did the Songs of Michael Ratty concert in October, the fall of 2017, with Broadway performers, because, I don't know, why not? And I had friends who knew people, and it was great. Jackie Burns sang in that concert. It was lovely, it was wonderful. I debuted a new song for the King's Legacy in that concert, and it became a song that people instantly were like, wow, that's gorgeous. Do that, more of that, please, yes. And it taught me so much about putting people on music that is new, like brand new, for a higher stakes feeling than just like, hey, this is a reading. This was a concert at 54 Below that was going to be recorded and had, 54 Below prices attached. That's some stakes. So I learned a lot about that for myself, for putting my own music on stage, but also for how other people interact with new material in a place that feels like it has stakes to it. And when they feel that you trust yourself as a writer, let me tell you, that's the thing that bred confidence in these people. Nothing else. And that was a huge lesson for me. Huge! Once I understood that, the next summer, I talked with the folks at Bristol Valley Theatre, my artistic home, about doing The King's Legacy, if they would ever consider a musical in their new work slot. And they essentially gently shot me down for a lot of practical reasons, and they weren't wrong. And the show also wasn't ready to go up for the next summer for 2018. No way. No way. But then when I came back the following summer, we got into conversation again, and I felt the show was ready. They liked what I was bringing to the table. They saw how I had a draw at the theater, and they ultimately said, yeah, okay. But we will have to extend that budget a little bit because this is complicated. And I said, I'll raise the money. I had done it before, and I would do it again. Not that that's a skill that I feel like I'm particularly good at, but I signed on to do it, and I had the opportunity for a world premiere of one of my musicals, the one I had been working on at that point for 6 years. Of course it was a yes, duh, and with people I loved and collaborated so well with. This was going to work, and it did. As part of this whole deal, we teamed up also with libraries, we got grants, and we brought the Sleepy Hollow musical later that fall of 2018, to BVT and did a reading of it there, gave the audience a taste of what's to come by having a new musical performed there as a new work something for the summer, and it got people excited, and it was a lot of fun to collaborate on new material in that way. In a first open reading for Sleepy Hollow, we learned a lot about that show, what people liked about the writing, what we wanted to do with it, and all that in preparation for the following summer. And I was rewriting furiously. I knew almost nothing at that point besides it was going to happen. It happened in the last slot of the summer, late August. Then it was a couple months later, I learned who my director was going to be, and we started to gather the production team. I was working with him in a dramaturgical capacity as well. I was, again, furiously rewriting. The structure worked, but a whole bunch of stuff had to change. And I was so excited and so nervous. And then we were getting to a point where I was going to be, in a few months, handing it over as a frozen script and saying, hey, everyone needs to do their work now, not just me. And so I had a deadline, fast and furious. I felt good. I felt like the show was going to work. We got to the summer, and it was just excitement all summer long. I actually was acting in one show and musical directing the first show. So I was there almost all summer, but people the entire summer kept coming up to me. We're so excited for your musical. We're so excited for your musical. And that was such a boost as well, knowing I'd be able to be in it and be in the room and hear what people are saying as they interact with the material. I wasn't making changes along the way. This was just going to be putting up my show for the first time on stage. And y'all, it went so well. Show's not perfect. We have a recording of that show, and I look at so much of the stuff and I'm like, well, that's embarrassing. How did we put that on stage? Why did I let that happen? But that's not the point. Put that over there, Michael. The point was, I came together with fantastic people and we made art. And the story came to life, and it worked, and audiences loved it, and it did very well at the box office. There were just all the positives. I had so much joy and momentum coming through that process, and I didn't feel like an imposter of a writer anymore. I felt like there's more I could do. I could improve it. There was betterness to be had. And coming out of that, we went into a period of motivation and the second industry reading later that fall. Some industry did come to that one, and then a pandemic hit. And I stopped writing. And I lost faith. I think we all did, to an extent. And then I'm grateful to be VT one more gigantic time here, when the artistic director in the fall, always fall, y'all, always fall. The fall of 2020 reached out to me and said, hey, we're gonna do one person shows outside next summer, and we have no one-person musical. Would you like to create a George Gershwin show to perform? I said, okay, let's do it. I had 6 months. I knew a lot about George, but not nearly enough. So I had to dive into a research process, and I did. It was way more in depth than anything I had done before. I had only a couple of months to do the research before I had to start actually writing. I began to get some help along the way. I joined a creativity group. This is also when I started the YouTube channel, y'all. This was during this period of time. So video 1, now we're in video 100. Video 1 took place during the time when I was creating this show from nothingness. And I did so much research and so much planning, and that was a large part of my process, trying to figure out what music to use of his influences, of other people from the time period. What was the story I was gonna tell? Plotting it out deeply with that research. And then I was able to sit down and write the show, like the script itself, in 4 days. Never done that before. I was writing it for myself based on the things that I love, for sure, because I was going to perform it, but I also wanted to create a story that was going to live on well past this performance, well past me. And I only had 3 readings I could do, and I found such a beautiful story in this man's life, in his art, in his journey. And I was lit up. And then I performed it, and it, again, went so well. Everyone just loved the show. I love that show. I only made a couple tweaks after that summer. But coming back out of that show, I learned that once you have a couple successes, if you feel like there's no way forward because of any reason, really any reason that feels like it's stopping you, then you're not going to keep writing. So I hit pause again. This time it was because I had internal stuff, personal life stuff that I really had to deal with. Mostly I came to the realization I couldn't continue working on The King's Legacy until I dealt with it. There was no way I could finish writing Anne's story in a way that truly felt authentic until I knew things about myself and my own history. And I've said it so many times, sometimes glibly, but I truly believe that everyone will benefit from therapy. And I certainly did. Therapy, meditation, a workout schedule, creativity schedule, all sorts of things that I utilized in order to get myself through a healing process that took 3 years. I didn't write anything for 3 years. I built a business, started a YouTube channel. I didn't write anything. I wrote copy. No musical theater. I taught other people how to write musical theater, and I wasn't writing it. Feels like a dark period in my life a little bit, but it's not. It's actually a period of joy and healing and forward momentum. And I'm forever grateful that I took that time for myself. Because when I got back into writing, starting with one of my first cohort members and I started teaming up, working lightly on a queer pop punk version of Hamlet. Shh, not too much to say about it yet. But that got me back in. I was back in. And it was a couple more years before I was able to actually start working on The King's Legacy again. Actually, only about 6 months ago. Whew. And when I finally did, I was in a completely different place. And it began to flow. And now my writing is no longer a struggle at all. I'm clearly a musical theater writer. I'm someone who understands this craft so well that I'm able to teach it. And I find so much joy in teaching it and providing information to other people like you, that this healing process, again, taking time for oneself, was the key to moving forward in this career, in this art form. I'm so grateful to myself that I was able to do it. I recognize also that's a privilege that I was able to do it. But at the same time, I kind of built that privilege to an extent, by creating my business. Because there was a period of time when I quit working where I was working during the pandemic, and then I had no real work to speak of. I had to make it. So I did that work first. Did some healing work along the way, and then I was able to get back into writing. It's not been an easy journey, friends. But I wouldn't trade any part of it for the world. None of it. All of the work that I do on this channel, in classes, in the Musical Theater Writing Collective, with my clients, is to work with them both on the art form, but also on their life. It's kind of cliche to say, but if you want to work on your art, you have to work on your life. And I think that those two are so intertwined, we can't really get away from it. And that's not a bad thing. It's a beautiful thing, because we do art, because we are human, which means you have to work on your humanity in order to keep making that art. And here we are. Thank you to all of you who've been with me across the past 3.5 years of this crazy YouTube adventure, across the past 100 videos, plus the live streams and the interviews and all the shorts, and especially to all of you who've been with me even longer through my writing journey. Wherever you came into my life, you are why I'm here right now doing what I'm doing. And I'm eternally grateful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And a special thank you to the community of beautiful and brilliant souls who are here with me in the Musical Theater Writing Collective and as clients. All of you keep me going every single day to keep teaching, keep giving, keep learning and creating. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And if you're not a part of our community yet, I so hope you'll consider joining us. Feel free to reach out to me directly. We can have a conversation about that. I'd love to help you out. I'd love to have you with us if that sounds of interest to you. And if you want to learn a little bit more about what it is we do, what it's all about, then you should watch this video here next. Otherwise, my friends, until the next time. Thank you all for being here with me today, and I'll see you again soon. Cheers!